to technical difficulties, the beginning portion of this video is not available. To sum up what you have missed, today we will be making a sword, and you will need cardboard, a toilet paper tube, box cutter or a pair of scissors, a pencil, ruler, and some popsicle sticks.
So we got all of our materials. We're good and ready to start. But I think this piece of cardboard is just a little bit too long for my liking. Using a ruler, I think I'm going to trim it to about 24 inches. So it'll cover the entire blade length and a little bit for the handle. And I think I forgot to mention, but we're also going to need a hot glue gun. So start getting that prepared while we trace out and trim our cardboard. Since my ruler is not long enough, I'm going to measure out 24 inches in two little parts and then trim out the extra with the box cutter. Alright, I've got two pieces. This will be the blade and handle piece. And don't throw out this extra piece yet if you have one. For this, we can use to make a cross guard or beef up the handle a little bit. Just make a little bit of extra details that'll make our sword look pretty. But let's move on to the trace out and design of our sword. Alright. For tracing out our sword, that's going to be fairly simple actually. I want this to be a very simple sword. So, not a whole lot of detail, very straight edges. But to do that, first of all, we're going to need to figure out our width. This should be 6 inches if I recall correctly. So, I guess I'll make a fairly thick sword. So what I'll do for that is, since this is 6 inches long, I'm going to just put a little marking of 3 inches at the bottom, put another little marking of 3 inches at the midsection, and put a third marking right at the top. Connect the dots, and there you go. We should have a line clean and straight through the middle of our piece of cardboard. You do not necessarily have to use a piece of cardboard that is 6 inches wide, but I'm just using it for the sake of simplicity. Now that we've got this traced out, we can take our handy-dandy little box cutter and just cut right along that line. Alright, now that we got the piece of cardboard split in half, I'm going to make a few measurements at the top, and I think I'm just going to cut out a nice triangular point. I'll demonstrate for you. So for my triangular point, I'm going to measure once again across the width, and since it is 3 inches, half of 3 inches is 1.5 inches. I'll put that as my center point. And at this point, I can just take the ruler and get an idea as to what kind of angle I want for this sword. I'll go for a relatively steep angle, so I'll put a little notch here, measure it out, and it comes to 2 3/4 inches exactly. I'll put a little notch there, go to the other side, put another notch at 2 3/4, and I'm assuming you might know what I do next. I'm going to draw a line from both notches I just made up to the center points, giving us a nice triangular shape. I'll try and use scissors to cut this out, because it might be easier. And there we go, a nice triangular point. Now all we do is repeat that on the other piece. This is a new one on me.
It's probably just the way the cardboard was made. Weird little string.
After both pieces are cut, go ahead and just take them, line them up,
And see if your points meet. If they don't, just do a little bit of trimming until they do. Mine meet up quite well. So now, I'll work on this end and make a tang.
using a similar method
That I did to cut the ends of this, I'm just going to trace
a little rectangle right at the bottom. That is the tang on the sword, and it
helps give it its
rigidity. So for that, and like I said, this is a short sword, so I don't mind the handle also being a little short. I'm going to make maybe a 6-inch handle. Yeah, 6 inches seems like it could work. So I'm going to make 2 little tick marks right from the bottom up to 6 inches. Trace across, and for this bit,
I'm going to
measure a little bit in here. So I'm going to make the handle a lot thinner, maybe halfway thinner than the actual sword blade itself. So once again, measure it out, 1.5 at the bottom.
And you can see that little tick mark I've made. I'm going to go from this little tick mark and just out a little bit in both directions. With this, I have decided to go 3/4 inches both ways away from the center,
Making it
a total of 1.5 inches. And I will do the same thing on the bottom.
make a little point here, measure 3/4 from it, and then I'll trace lines down. You'll see in a moment.
And you can see, just like that, I've made a little handle piece that won't be as wide as the blade and has just enough space for large grip, and I'm also going to be putting popsicle sticks in it to improve its rigidity.
Get to that in a moment.
But for now, I'll trace it out on this piece and then cut them both out.
And just like that, I've managed to get both pieces of my sword cut. And something happened to them, which I kind of did expect. So, as you can see, it's not very sturdy. It's already bent a little bit, which has kind of reduced the rigidity already. Now, I was expecting this, which is why these popsicle sticks will come in handy. Now, since they're made out of wood and they're rather thin, we can put them inside the handle of our sword and the blade and all that other jazz. But what these are supposed to do is, since they're sturdy, we can put them side by side like this, and that way they won't flex or bend very easily. Or I can't quite demonstrate, but I'll show you what I mean once I put them in the sword. In fact, I'll show you right now. So, we've got here our 2 sword blades, or 2 halves to a sword blade, and our popsicle sticks. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip this one over, because we kind of want the uglier looking side on the inside. We don't want this to be on the inside because, well, maybe it won't look as pretty. But what we're going to do is kind of just line the popsicle sticks up in a weird little pattern all the way down the blade. And we kind of just repeat that until we reach the end of the blade. Just like that. Or similar to that. Then after you do this, you kind of readjust them. You can trace them out if you like, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue them in place the way they are now. After a little bit of readjustment, of course. So, quick readjustment. They're all in a nice place that I want them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the glue gun, and I'm just going to glue each one at a time, in the way they are now. I'll demonstrate. There we go, that's 3 down, and now we just do that exact same process, picking one up, gluing, and placing it back down to the rest of them.
All popsicle sticks are now glued in place,
And we can kind of begin some of the other assembly, which is, well, just
placing this piece on top of the other and gluing it in place. Like so.
once you're gluing the two pieces together, make sure to line them up as best you can while the glue is still setting. Else you'll have a kind of a weird looking offset sword that you can trim if you don't like the looks of it, but for me I try and get as accurate as possible. And now, you can see, a lot more rigid, and the handle does not want to bend. But it's still got some open gaps on the side, so an easy fix for that is just go in with your hot glue gun and just put a bead of glue, carefully squeeze it shut, and then let it set up like that. And you'd go around and do that on any open areas. I'll do a little bit on mine because I'm not perfect. My sword's not perfect, and I certainly have some gaps to seal. If you're like me though, and you have yourself a metal work surface, this stuff is actually really nice for just setting up hot glue almost instantly, because it saps all the heat out of it. So you'd kind of squeeze your blade together, smush it against the table, give it a second or two, and ta-da! It's all set. Maybe hold it a little bit longer. The surface only sets, not so much the inside. But definitely nice for trying to cool off hot glue faster. Remember to keep nice, even pressure across everything. You don't want some parts popping up and then just not sticking. It won't look as pretty. Well, now that the glue is all nice and set up, we can start working on the handle portion of this. And like I mentioned before, I'm using a toilet paper tube as my handle. And, well, it could work just like this, but I want to add little detail beforehand. Remember that spare sheet of cardboard? Well, we're going to use that to cut out a little cross guard, and that will just be slotted right in here. Once again, just cut two pieces. Keep it simple. What I'm going to do for this cross guard of mine is,
Well, again, keeping it simple.
I'm just going to measure out a 6-inch long piece of cardboard, and I'll do that on the top and the bottom here. Trace the line,
Cut the box off.
and there you go.
Simple little square cardboard.
After that, well, you can have it really at any thickness. You could have a crossguard that is this thick and this simplistic, but I want to just go for a little bit more detail than this. So since it's wide enough, I guess I'll just split it in half again. So this is a 6-inch by 6-inch square. That makes things easier. So let's mention for a little notch at the top, little notch at the bottom, trace a line through the middle, and cut.
There you go, 2 pieces.
And just like what we did with the sword, I'm going to make little triangular cuts at the top and bottom.
What's different about this bit is I'm going to
Not make it a point,
but make it more hexagonal shaped.
so it'll have a little flat bar on the top.
I'll just give you a quick demonstration as to what I mean. And there we go. A nice tapered looking point with a flat end. I'll just do the same thing on this end and then duplicate that on this piece.
Now I've got both pieces of my guard cut out and to the shape I want them. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of them and kind of press them to the bottom of the sword to get an idea as to how thick this is, how thick and wide, and we're going to try and get that as close to center as possible. Doesn't quite matter if it's exact, because as soon as you cut the hole out on this one, you can glue the two pieces together, cut the hole out on the next piece, and just slide it onto the sword. And I'll show you what the final result looks like. I've got my guard all nice and cut out. I've got a relatively large hole in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to test fit the handle with the hole and see if it fits. No guarantees. It might need a little trimming. Well, I guess not. Just go around the edges, top and bottom. Now with the guard attached to the sword itself, the next step would be to work on the handle. And like I said, I've got myself a toilet paper tube, and I could just slot it on and glue it in place, but it's still a bit loose. So I think I'm going to take some of our scrap pieces of cardboard that I've just put aside, glue them onto the center of the blade, or the center of the handle, cut up my tube a little bit, and then kind of glue around that. Let's go up above and I can show you. So as I already mentioned, I'm thinking I'm just going to take these pieces and
Just glue them on. But you can already see that it's just a little bit
bit too long. So I'll glue it on, then I'll use the scissors to just trim off any of the excess. Ooh, this stuff is hot. Make sure not to burn yourself.
Both pieces are attached on either side.
And now I'm just going to, well, quickly trim with a quick snip. Okay, not as quick as I was hoping.
Let's try again.
And a quick snip. There we go.
Both pieces are glued, trimmed.
Got a nice flat end of the handle.
Now to work on the handle itself.
I think for this,
Squish it down a little bit so it makes more of an oval shape. Then take your scissors, not your box cutter, and cut as straight a line as you can right up the squished end. So now your paper towel too will open up. We'll use this to our advantage and wrap this around our handle.
and an easy way to do that is to glue it
Kind of starting on this edge.
I'll demonstrate for you.
Now that it is glued in place, just allow it to set for a bit before you start work on anything else.
The glue has set on this, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of the cardboard tube and kind of flatten it and roll it around the handle. Some ways I can do that are taking more glue and gluing along the strip here, folding it over, and pressing it down. Let it set, glue the next area right here, fold over, let set, so on, so forth. Ta-da! Now we are finished. Well, I'm finished. Some other things you can now do is maybe pretty up the handle by putting your own details on it, chopping off this end to make it flush with the cardboard tube. But for me, I think I'm done with this sword. It's got a nice smooth handle, a nice wide blade, very simplistic guard, and now we can do stuff like swing it around. Oh boy. It's nice and durable because, well, got those popsicle sticks in it. So no bending, easily swing it around, but careful not to hit it too hard into other things because it's cardboard. It does have its limits. The next step from here would be, like I said, add details. What I would make next for this is just a small sheath. Maybe make it go on your back, go on your hips somewhere. Who knows? Pull out of your coat. But there you go. Very simple sword. And this is a short sword. You can go much further. In fact, the sword I actually have with me is this one. This is a rapier that someone requested me to make. As you can see, it's got a lot thinner of a handle, it's got the pommel detail, and it's even got a curved guard leading up to this octagonal one. This is just a simple shape that I decided looked good, and this curve was made by actually making a lot of little cuts with the grain of the cardboard, something I can go over in another thing. But this does have a sheath, and this blade is completely different. It's long and slender, it's got a curved end instead of the pointed end of this one, but this doesn't have any popsicle sticks in it to keep it rigid, because I felt it would make it too thick. So the difference with this one is, it's got all those little tubes going this way, instead of along the blade in this sort of fashion. So it makes it a little bit rigid, but it won't be as durable as the popsicle stick one, because, well, this is wood, this is cardboard. And this was a very simple sheath. I can go over in another video how to make a sheath out of like one piece of cardboard, 2 sheets of cardboard, or in this case, this was made with many. It's got the 2 sides, which are just identical pieces, with this little bar glued in place. And that is the sheath. It's a friction fit, so there's no magnets, no Velcro, no other stickiness to keep it in place. Purely friction. And that's something you can do if you just put your mind to it. But for now, I think I'm going to mess around with these 2 swords I've got, and I'll see you another time.